The propositioned late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Texas plains as Catherine Walsh stepped down from the dusty stagecoach. In the town of Cedar Creek, at 28, she possessed the kind of practical beauty that came from intelligence rather than decoration. Clear blue eyes, auburn hair pinned back sensibly, and the posture of a woman who'd learned to rely on herself. She carried a single carpetbag and wore her best traveling dress, though best was a relative term for someone whose circumstances had been reduced to near poverty. The letter in her reticule had brought her here, responding to an advertisement that had seemed like her last hope for independence. Mrs. Walsh. The voice belonged to a tall man in his mid-30s, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent his life working under the open sky. He wore clean clothes and had obviously made an effort to appear presentable, but there was something in his dark eyes that suggested complexity beneath the surface courtesy. "Mr. Garrett," Catherine replied, extending her hand. "Thank you for meeting me." James Garrett studied the woman who'd answered his carefully worded advertisement seeking a wife. She was prettier than he'd expected, but more importantly, she carried herself with the kind of dignity that suggested strength of character. That was going to be essential for what he had in mind. "The ride to the ranch is about an hour," James said, helping her into a well-maintained buckboard. "We can talk on the way." As they left the small town behind and headed into the vast expanse of Texas rangeland, Catherine found herself studying her potential husband from the corner of her eye. His advertisement had been straightforward: successful rancher seeking, wife for companionship and partnership, comfortable circumstances guaranteed, serious inquiries only. What the advertisement hadn't mentioned was that James Garrett was one of the most successful cattle barons in the territory, owner of the Double Star Ranch that stretched for thousands of acres across some of the finest grazing land in Texas. "Your letter mentioned you're a widow," James said as they traveled. Double quotes, "Yes. My husband died in a factory accident 2 years ago." Catherine replied, "Since then, I've been working as a seamstress," but she paused, choosing her words carefully. "The opportunities for women alone are limited, and you're willing to marry a stranger for security?" Catherine turned to look at him directly. "Mr. Garrett, I believe in being honest about practical matters. You need a wife, and I need a home. If we can build respect and perhaps affection on that foundation, then we'll both benefit from the arrangement." James nodded approvingly. He'd received dozens of responses to his advertisement, but Catherine's letter had stood out for its directness and lack of romantic nonsense. That practicality was exactly what his plan required. "Tell me about your ranch," Catherine said as they crested a hill that offered a view of the vast Garrett spread. 25,000 acres, James replied. 3,000 head of cattle, 47 permanent hens, and a house that's been waiting for a woman's touch for longer than I care to admit. The ranch house, when it came into view, took Catherine's breath away. It was a sprawling 2-story structure built of local stone and timber with wide porches and large windows that spoke of both comfort and prosperity. Outbuildings were arranged with military precision, and even from a distance, Catherine could see that everything was maintained to the highest standards. "It's beautiful," she said sincerely. "It's empty," James replied quietly. "Has been for 8 years, since my mother died." As they pulled up to the house, Catherine noticed something that struck her as odd. Several of the ranch hands were working unusually close to the main house, and they all seemed to be watching the arriving buckboard with more interest than simple curiosity would warrant. "Mr. Garrett," she said as he helped her down from the wagon, "before we go any further with this arrangement, I need to ask you something directly." "What's that?" Catherine took a deep breath. "Are you sure you want a wife? Because from what I can see, you have a very successful operation here. You could easily hire a housekeeper, and many men in your position choose to remain bachelors rather than complicate their lives with marriage." James was quiet for a moment, studying Catherine's perceptive face. She was more observant than he'd expected, and he realized he was going to have to be more careful about revealing his true motivations. "Mrs. Walsh," he said finally, "a man gets lonely. Success doesn't keep you warm at night or give you someone to share your thoughts with." It was a reasonable answer, but Catherine sensed there was more to the story, something about the way James's eyes didn't quite meet hers, The slight tension in his shoulders suggested he wasn't telling her everything. "Let me show you the house," James said, deflecting further questions. "You can decide if it's the kind of home you'd want to make." The interior of the ranch house was even more impressive than the exterior. Spacious rooms with fine furniture, a kitchen that was a cook's dream, and upstairs, a master bedroom suite that spoke of comfort and luxury. But Catherine noticed something else. Despite its grandeur, the house felt sterile, more like a hotel than a home. "It's magnificent," she said honestly. "But may I ask why you've never married before? A man in your position." "Never found the right woman," James replied. But again, Catherine sensed there was more to the story. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible frontier stories. You won't believe the shocking secret this rancher is hiding. As they completed the tour and returned to the main parlor, Catherine made her decision. The practical advantages of the marriage were undeniable: security, comfort, and respect as the wife of a successful rancher. But something about James Garrett's evasiveness troubled her. "Mr. Garrett," she said, settling into a chair opposite him, "I'm prepared to accept your proposal, but I want to be clear about my expectations, which are honesty between us, respect for my opinions, and the understanding that while this may be a practical arrangement, I intend to be a true partner in whatever life we build together." James studied Catherine's determined face and realized he was getting more than he'd bargained for. He'd expected a compliant woman grateful for security. Instead, he was getting someone who clearly intended to be an equal partner in marriage. "Agreed," he said, though privately he wondered how his plan would work with such a strong-willed wife. "Then yes, Mr. Garrett, I'll marry you." They shook hands to seal their agreement, and Catherine felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. She'd solved her immediate problems, but she had the distinct feeling that she'd also walked into a situation far more complicated than a simple marriage of convenience. As evening fell over the Double Star Ranch, Catherine unpacked in the guest room that would be hers until the wedding, and James stood on his porch planning how to reveal the real reason. He needed a wife. The truth was more complex than loneliness or desire for companionship. James Garrett was facing a crisis that threatened everything he'd built, and he needed Catherine Walsh for reasons she couldn't imagine. The question was whether she'd still agree to the marriage when she learned what those reasons were. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the parlor of the Double Star Ranch house, with only the local preacher and Mrs. Henderson, the neighbor who'd agreed to serve as witness. In attendance, Catherine wore a simple blue dress she'd made herself, and James wore his best suit, though both of them approached the ceremony with the seriousness of people entering a business arrangement rather than the joy of lovers. "Do you, James Samuel Garrett, take Catherine Elizabeth Walsh to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Reverend Morrison asked. "I do," James replied, slipping a simple gold band onto Catherine's finger. "Do you, Catherine Elizabeth Walsh, take James Samuel Garrett to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," Catherine said, though she caught herself glancing at James's face, still trying to read the emotions he kept so carefully hidden. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Texas, I now pronounce you husband and wife." As they shared a brief, polite kiss to seal their marriage, Catherine felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and unease. She'd achieved security and respectability, but she still sensed that James was keeping important secrets from her. The feeling only grew stronger in the days that followed. As Catherine settled into her role as mistress of the Double Star Ranch, she began to notice things that didn't quite add up. Ranch hands who stopped talking when she approached, urgent letters that James read privately before burning, unexpected visitors who met with her husband in closed-door conferences. "James," she said one evening as they sat on the porch after dinner, "is everything all right with the ranch? You seem preoccupied lately." "Just the usual concerns," James replied, but Catherine could see the tension around his eyes. "What kind of concerns? Maybe I can help. I managed my late husband's accounts for years, and I understand business better than you might think." James looked at his new wife, weighing how much to reveal. Catherine had proven herself to be intelligent and capable in the 3 weeks since their marriage, transforming the sterile ranch house into a warm home and earning the respect of the ranch hands with her fair treatment and genuine interest in their welfare. "Catherine," he said slowly, "there are some things about my situation that I haven't told you." "I suspected as much," Catherine replied calmly. "What kind of things?" James was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the vast expanse of his land. "3 years ago, I borrowed heavily to expand the ranch, bought more land, more cattle, upgraded all the equipment. It seemed like a good investment at the time, but cattle prices have dropped significantly, and I've had some bad luck with weather and disease. The loan payments are—" He paused. "They're more than I can manage with current income." Catherine felt her stomach clench. "How much more?" "Enough. That the bank is threatening foreclosure," James admitted. "I have 6 months to come up with $50,000, or I lose everything." The figure was staggering. Catherine had known the ranch was successful, but she'd had no idea of the scale of James's financial problems. "That's why you needed a wife," she said, understanding dawning on her face. "Not for companionship, for some kind of financial advantage." James turned to look at her directly. "My grandfather's will included a provision that I've never had cause to use before. If I marry and my wife produces an heir, I can claim a trust fund he established." $75,000. Catherine felt as if she'd been struck. "You married me to get pregnant. I married you because I need that money to save the ranch," James said. "And yes, the trust requires an heir. So our entire marriage is about producing a child to unlock your inheritance." Catherine's voice was carefully controlled, but James could see the hurt and anger in her eyes. "Catherine, please understand. I was facing ruin. Everything my family built for 3 generations was about to be lost. I needed a solution, and I was just the means to that solution." Catherine stood up abruptly. "A convenient womb with legs. It's not that simple, isn't it?" Catherine's composure finally cracked. "You deceived me, James. You let me think this was a mutual arrangement for mutual benefit, when actually you were using me to solve your financial problems." James stood as well, reaching toward her. "Catherine, I know how this sounds, but how it sounds." Catherine stepped back from his reaching hand. "It sounds like I've been a fool. It sounds like I married a man who saw me as livestock to be bred." Subscribe to our channel now. The explosive confrontation that follows will change everything between them. The argument that followed was heated but quiet, both of them conscious of the ranch hands who might overhear. Catherine's sense of betrayal was profound, while James tried to justify his deception as necessity rather than malice. "You could have told me the truth from the beginning," Catherine said finally. "I might have agreed to help you anyway." "Would you have?" James asked. "Would you have married me if you'd known I needed you to bear a child to save my ranch?" Catherine was quiet for a long moment, forced to consider the question honestly. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I deserved the chance to make that choice with full knowledge." "You're right," James said quietly. "I should have been honest from the beginning. I was afraid you'd refuse, and I was desperate." Catherine studied her husband's face, seeing genuine remorse alongside the worry and fear he'd been carrying. She was angry and hurt, but she was also practical enough to understand the position they were both in now. "So what happens now?" she asked. "We're married. The ranch is still in danger, and you still need that inheritance." "I don't know," James admitted. "I understand if you want to leave. I can arrange transportation back east, and I'll make sure you have enough money to start over somewhere else." Catherine looked out at the ranch that had become her home, thinking about the life she'd begun to build here. Despite the deception, she'd grown to love the double star. More troubling, she'd begun to develop genuine feelings for James, which made his betrayal even more painful. "James," she said slowly, "answer me honestly. Is there any part of you that wanted a wife for reasons that had nothing to do with money?" James looked at Catherine, seeing her intelligence, her strength, the way she'd brought warmth and life to his empty house. "Yes," he said quietly, "more than I expected when this started." "Then we need to talk about how to move forward," Catherine said. "Because despite everything, I don't want to see you lose your family's ranch. And despite everything, I don't want to leave." As they sat back down to plan their future, both James and Catherine understood that their marriage had fundamentally changed. The foundation of practical arrangement had been shattered by deception and hurt. But from the ruins, something more complex and potentially more genuine was beginning to emerge. The question was whether they could build trust and perhaps even love on the wreckage of James's desperate plan. 6 months after their confrontation about the inheritance, Catherine stood in the kitchen of the Double Star Ranch house, her hand resting on her slightly rounded belly. The morning sickness had finally passed, and she was beginning to enjoy the changes pregnancy was bringing to her body and her relationship with James. The months since learning about James's deception had been difficult, but transformative. They'd had to rebuild their marriage on a foundation of honesty rather than convenience, and the process had been sometimes painful, but ultimately strengthening. "Morning," James said, entering the kitchen with the easy familiarity that had developed between them. "How are you feeling today?" "Better," Catherine replied. Accepting the gentle kiss he pressed to her temple. "The baby seems to have settled down from all that early fussing." James's hand joined hers on her belly, and Catherine saw the mixture of wonder and protectiveness that crossed his face whenever he thought about their coming child. Whatever his original motivations for marriage, there was no question that he was genuinely excited about becoming a father. "Any word from the bank?" Catherine asked, though she already knew the answer from James's expression. "They've agreed to extend the deadline until after the baby's born," James said. "Mr. Peterson says as long as we can access the trust fund within a month of the birth, they'll restructure the loan rather than foreclose." Catherine nodded. The banking situation had been complicated by the terms of the grandfather's trust, which required not just marriage and pregnancy, but the actual birth of a living child. They were walking a financial tightrope, but at least they had a clear path forward. "James," Catherine said, setting down her coffee cup, "I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" "After the baby comes and we settle the debt, what then? Do we just go back to being business partners who happen to share a bed?" James studied his wife's face, seeing the question behind her question. In the months since their confrontation, their relationship had evolved from practical arrangement to something approaching genuine partnership, but neither of them had dared to name what was growing between them. "What would you like it to be?" he asked carefully. Catherine took a deep breath. "I'd like it to be a real marriage, not just for financial necessity or even for the baby, but because we choose each other, even after everything I put you through with the deception, especially after that," Catherine replied, "because we've worked through it honestly, because you've shown me that you can admit when you're wrong and try to do better." James reached for Catherine's hands. "I love you," he said simply. "I don't know exactly when it happened, but somewhere along the way, you stopped being a solution to my problems and became the reason I want to solve them." Catherine felt tears spring to her eyes. "I love you too, which is why I need to tell you something." "What?" "I've been working on a backup plan," Catherine said, "just in case something goes wrong with the birth or the trust fund." James looked puzzled. "What kind of backup plan?" Catherine led him to the desk in the parlor and pulled out a thick folder of documents. "I've been corresponding with cattle buyers in Kansas City and Chicago. I've also been researching new breeding techniques and feed management systems." James opened the folder and found detailed financial projections, market analysis, and business plans that would make any banker impressed. "Catherine, this is brilliant," he said, scanning the documents. "If we implement even half of these improvements, we could increase profitability by 30% within 2 years." Catherine finished, "Enough to pay off the debt even without the trust fund." James looked at his wife with amazement and admiration. "You've been working on this for months." "I told you I wanted to be a true partner," Catherine replied. "That means sharing the burden of saving our ranch, not just providing the biological solution to your inheritance problem." "Our ranch," James repeated, and Catherine heard the difference in his tone. "Yes, our ranch, our future, our family." Subscribe to our channel for more incredible frontier love stories. You won't believe how this inspiring tale of partnership concludes. 3 months later, Catherine gave birth to a healthy son they named Samuel, after James's grandfather. The baby was strong and perfect, and his rival not only secured the trust fund, but completed the transformation of their marriage from arrangement to genuine love story. But the most significant change came when James presented Catherine with a revised deed to the ranch. "What's this?" she asked, still recovering from childbirth but alert enough to recognize legal documents. "It's a new deed," James explained, "making you a full partner in the Double Star Ranch, not just my wife, but my equal partner in ownership." Catherine read the document with growing amazement. "James, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," James interrupted. "Your ideas and work saved this ranch as much as the trust fund did. More importantly, you saved me from becoming the kind of man who would use someone without giving anything real in return." Catherine looked at her husband holding their son, surrounded by the evidence of their successful partnership, and realized that her practical arrangement had become something far more valuable than she'd ever dared hope for. "You know," she said with a smile, "when I told you you need a wife and I need a home, I thought I was just solving immediate problems. What did we actually solve?" James asked. "Everything," Catherine replied. "We solved everything." 1 year later, the Double Star Ranch was the most profitable cattle operation in 3 counties, run by partners who'd proven that the best marriages were built on mutual respect, shared goals, and the willingness to choose love over convenience. Their son Samuel grew up knowing that his parents had found each other not through romance, but through honest need, and had built their love through hard work, forgiveness, and the daily choice to be worthy of each other's trust. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories of love, partnership, and second chances from the American frontier. Hit that subscribe button now, because these tales prove that the strongest relationships are built on truth, respect, and shared dreams. When visitors asked about their love story, Catherine and James would smile and explain that sometimes the best marriages begin not with passion, but with honesty about what you need and the courage to work together to build something better than either person could achieve alone. Your subscription helps us continue bringing these incredible tales of frontier partnerships to life. Subscribe now and join us for more amazing stories that prove real love is about choosing each other every day.